I didn't expect to see my own suitcase on the porch, let alone with a post-it note stuck to it like a grocery list. It's just the three of us now. Please find somewhere else to stay. That's all it said. No greeting. No explanation. Just Haley's sharp handwriting and silence behind the door I used to call home. I stood there, still wearing the hospital discharge socks and a coat that didn't close properly over the fresh bandages on my stomach, wondering if this was some kind of twisted joke. I rang the bell.
Knocked.
I called Brent's name until my voice cracked. Nothing. Only the sound of Haley whispering SHH to the kids, like I was some stray dog scratching at the door. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. I had been deliberately shut out.
But why now?
And after everything I'd done for them, what changed? 3 years earlier, I sold my little house, an old craftsman with a peach tree out front and a squeaky porch swing Harold built by hand. After his death, Brent said it made sense to move in with them. You'll help with the kids, Mom. We'll take care of you in return. It sounded fair. Loving even. I handed over nearly all the money, $165,000, to help expand their home. New kitchen, playroom,
Guest suite. My room.
and for a while it worked. I made pancakes on Sundays, helped with science projects, read bedtime stories. I became a fixture, predictable, dependable. But I didn't notice how fast I was disappearing from the family photo. The small slights came first, Haley's passive-aggressive sighs, the canceled invitations. The way "thank you" quietly vanished from their vocabulary. Then came this, abandonment at my weakest. A quiet erasure, perfectly timed while I was still healing from surgery. My back hurt. My stitches stung. But none of that compared to the dull, hollow ache of being discarded by your only child. I sat on my suitcase at the edge of the porch, the winter air nipping at my fingers, wondering how long I had been blind to the truth. Was I ever family or just a convenience, a means to an end? And if that's the case, what exactly do they think I'm going to do now? I didn't even realize I was crying until a woman at the bus stop offered me a tissue and a hesitant smile. I thanked her, but I couldn't speak. My throat was tight with shame. How do you explain that you've just been kicked out of your own son's house, fresh out of surgery, nowhere to go, and not a single soul expecting you? The suitcase beside me felt heavier than it should have, not from what was inside, but from what had been left behind. No photo albums. No Harold's watch.
No earlobes.
Just some folded clothes and a curling iron, like I was some overnight guest who overstayed her welcome. But I wasn't a guest. I was the one who paid for that house to grow. That bedroom they cleared out? It only existed because I signed away my past to build their future. That's when I remembered Judith. Judith and I had met in nursing school over 40 years ago, two stubborn Southern girls with big hair and bigger hearts. She was there when Harold and I married, when Brent was born, and when cancer finally took Harold from me. We hadn't talked as much lately. Life has a way of getting in the way, but I knew one thing: Judith would answer. And she did on the third ring, with the same no-nonsense tone I've always loved. "Alice, are you okay?" I tried to answer, but all that came out was a choked sob. "I need help," I whispered. And that's all it took. "Tell me where you are." "I'm on my way." She found me 20 minutes later, pulled up in that old green Ford with a chipped paint and half a tank of fury in her eyes. She didn't ask questions. She just opened the door and waited. That ride to her place was the quietest 20 minutes of my life. I stared out the window at the fading sun, wondering how everything unraveled so fast. And deep down, a small voice whispered something I didn't want to hear. They had been planning this. While I was in the hospital, they were packing my life into boxes, swiping my credit card, picking new furniture, preparing to erase me completely. But not so fast. I might have been down, but I wasn't done. Judith's guest room wasn't fancy. A narrow twin bed, a chipped dresser, and a lamp that hummed faintly when it was on. But that night, it felt like a sanctuary. She helped me settle in, fussing over the pillows while muttering about ungrateful brats who don't deserve a mother like you. I barely spoke. My body throbbed from the incisions, and my mind replayed every moment like a cruel film reel. Brent ignoring my messages, Haley dragging the curtain closed over my grandson's face, that hideous post-it note. I clutched the mug of chamomile tea Judith placed in my hands, letting the warmth fight back the numbness spreading through me. But when she gently asked, "Have you checked her accounts?" that's when the fog started to lift. Something in her voice told me she knew, maybe even before I did. With shaking fingers, I logged into my online banking from Judith's tablet. Relief came first, my savings were untouched. But then came the credit card statement and my breath caught. $3,200 at Nordstrom, $1,700 at Sephora, $4,500 at a high-end furniture gallery. Restaurants I'd never heard of. All in the last 3 weeks, while I was prepping for surgery and trusting Brent and Haley with everything. I sat there, staring at the screen, the numbers blurring into a red haze of betrayal. Judith leaned over my shoulder, her voice cold and furious. "They're not just replacing your room, Alice. They're replacing you." I called the bank immediately. There was no more hesitation, no tears left in me. Just a calm, precise voice saying, "I'd like to report misuse. I want to freeze all cards."
Yes.
Effective immediately. When I hung up, I sat back and let the silence stretch. Judith placed a hand on mine, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of something stronger than sadness.
Rage.
But not the kind that lashes out blindly. No, this was quiet, focused. The kind of rage that makes you stand up, straighten your shoulders, and start making a plan. They thought they could throw me away like yesterday's leftovers, but they forgot who they were dealing with. I didn't raise a son, bury a husband, and survive life's worst storms just to roll over now. If they wanted a fight, well, they just got one.
I didn't sleep much that night.
Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that credit card statement, each charge a slap in the face. But it wasn't just about the money. It was the way they did it. Sneaky. Calculated. Like they were confident I'd never notice. Like I didn't matter enough to even cover their tracks. By morning, my painkillers had worn off, but something else had taken hold in their place. Clarity. For the first time in days, I felt awake, present, and dangerously calm. Over toast and coffee, Judith sat across from me with that look she gets when she's about to stir up a storm on someone's behalf. "So," she said, "what's next?" I stared into my cup and said what I knew I had to. "I'm going back to the house." She blinked. "You sure you're ready?" "No," I admitted. "But I need to get what's mine. The rest will come later." The drive over was surreal. I knew every curve of the road, every tree, every pothole. But it all looked different, like someone had painted over my memories in grayscale. Brent's car was in the driveway. Haley's wasn't. I thanked God for small mercies. Judith parked across the street and followed me up the walk like a silent bodyguard. The flower beds I'd cared for, my lavender, my marigolds, were overgrown. My fingers twitched just looking at them. I rang the bell. When Brent opened the door, his expression flickered. Surprise. Then guilt. Then something colder. He glanced at Judith, then back at me. "What are you doing here, Mom?" I didn't flinch. "I'm here for my things." He hesitated. "Lucy's not home." "Perfect," Judith said, crossing her arms. Inside, the house looked like a stranger's. New furniture. New rug. My framed family photos gone. I asked about my belongings and Brent led us to the garage. Cardboard boxes were stacked like an afterthought. I opened the top one and felt the air rush out of my lungs. Folded sweaters. A few books.
No earlobes.
No wedding album. No Harold's watch. No china set for my mother. "Where are my memories, Brent?" I asked, my voice cracking for the first time. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "They're not here," I said quietly. "Why aren't they here?" He ran a hand through his hair and muttered, "Lucy packed it all. Maybe they're upstairs." I didn't wait for permission. I was done being erased. I climbed those stairs like I was marching into battle, each step fueled by a mix of dread and fury. The attic door creaked open just like it always had, loud and dramatic. Like it knew secrets were buried up there. The smell of cedar and dust hit me instantly, and for a second, I was back in the early days after Harold died. When Brent helped me move in, and I stored boxes up here labeled in my handwriting, "Memories do not toss." I went straight to the far corner, heart pounding, and there it was, my old trunk, scuffed but intact. When I flipped it open, I nearly collapsed in relief. Inside were my photo albums, Harold's medals, and a velvet pouch with my mother's engagement ring, and a few of her brooches. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until it came out in a sob. Downstairs, I heard Brent's voice. He was on the phone. I froze. "No, she just showed up," he whispered.
Yeah.
With that old friend of hers. I know what we said, but what was I supposed to do? She's still my mom. A pause. Then softer. "Lucy, that's not fair." We agreed we'd wait until after the house sold to tell her about the nursing home. Nursing home? My grip tightened on the edge of the trunk. I stepped toward the attic door, straining to hear. The real estate agent said we could list it at $649,000. Maybe more with the right staging. It'll cover the debts and get us into that lake house. Look, I know it was her money that made this possible, but she agreed. He stopped talking. Maybe he heard the floorboard creak. Maybe he realized how loudly he was betraying me. I backed away, heart pounding harder than it had since the hospital. So that was the plan. Sell the house I paid for. Pocket the profit. Ship me off like unwanted furniture. The woman who raised him. The woman who nursed him through every childhood fever and cheered him through college. All for a down payment on some lakefront dream he didn't earn. I closed the trunk. My hands shaking, but not from weakness anymore. From resolve. They thought they'd get away with it. That I'd just fade out quietly. But I had just found the proof. And I wasn't going anywhere. I descended those stairs holding my memories like armor. Harold's medals tucked under my arm. My mother's jewelry pressed against my chest, and the wedding album that had survived both a marriage and a near erasure. Brent stood in the hallway, phone still in hand, eyes wide. He tried to play it off, asked if I'd found what I was looking for. I didn't answer. I just walked past him, each step a message. "You don't get to lie in my face anymore." Judith was in the garage, sorting through the boxes with the precision of a woman who'd raised 4 kids and been through 2 divorces. She didn't even look up when I returned, just asked, "Find anything?" I nodded. Some of it. Enough to move forward. But then I turned to Brent. "Were you ever planning to tell me about the house sale?" Asked, my voice level, every syllable sharp. His face turned pale. "You heard?" he asked. "Yes," I said simply. "And the nursing home. The lake house. All of it." Judith stood up straight, suddenly at my side. Brent ran a hand through his hair like a scolded teenager, then muttered, "It's not what you think." "Then please," I said, folding my arms, "enlighten me. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you were going to sell the home I helped pay for and ship me off without so much as a conversation." He stammered. "It's Lucy, she thought, with your health issues." "I had gallbladder surgery, Brent," I snapped. "Not dementia." That broke something in him. His shoulders slumped. "I didn't know how to stop it," he said quietly. "She made it sound like it was best for everyone." "Everyone but me," I said, blinking back the sting of tears. Then came the dagger. "It's not your house, Mom. Your name isn't on the deed." The words hit harder than I expected. Because he was right. I had trusted him.
No contracts. No paperwork.
Just a mother's faith that her son would never betray her. And that faith had cost me everything. Judith stepped in, her voice like ice. "We're taking these boxes now. And I strongly suggest you locate the rest of her valuables before this becomes a legal matter." Brent didn't argue. He just nodded, defeated. As we packed up the car, I caught a glimpse of papers on the desk through the garage door, real estate listings, a brochure for Maple Creek Senior Living, and a manila folder with my name scribbled on the tab. They had it all planned, but they hadn't planned on me fighting back. The car ride back to Judith's apartment was silent, but not the heavy kind. It was the kind of silence that comes when something inside you is shifted, when grief turns into grit. I sat in the passenger's seat, gripping the manila folder like it was my last lifeline. Inside were copies of emails, expense receipts, and that real estate brochure that proved Brent and Haley were ready to cash in on my sacrifice and toss me aside like a used napkin. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared out the window as familiar neighborhoods blurred past, thinking one thing: they almost got away with it. That night, Judith made tea, but I couldn't touch it. I sat at the table, sorting documents and circling dates. "Alice," she said softly, "what are you planning?" "Justice," I replied. "Not revenge. Not spite. Just the truth. With teeth." The next morning, I called the only person Harold ever trusted with our finances, Martin Geller, a man who'd handled our retirement accounts since the early 90s. I told him everything, and I could hear the disbelief in his pause. "Alice, they used your name in a real estate transaction without your consent." "That's what I need you to confirm," I said, my voice steely. He scheduled me for a meeting that afternoon, and when I walked into his office, worn down but standing tall, he looked at me the same way he had the day Harold passed, with respect and care. We combed through every account, every transfer. My pension and Social Security were still secure, but the $165,000? Legally, without any documentation, it was considered a gift, unless, of course, we could prove misuse or deception. Then Martin pulled up a dormant account I had nearly forgotten, Harold's old life insurance fund, invested in mutuals. "You still have over $41,000 here," he said. "It's grown nicely." And just like that, I could breathe again. It wasn't the full amount they owed me, but it was enough to start over. A down payment on a life I owned, free and clear. As I stepped out of the bank into the warm Carolina sunlight, a strange mix of grief and possibility settled into my chest. I had been betrayed, but I was no longer broken. I didn't want my old life back. I wanted something better, and now I had the means to build it. The apartment was small, just a one-bedroom in a quiet senior community on the edge of Asheville, but when I walked through the door, keys trembling in my hand, it felt like freedom. The carpet smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, the walls were bare, and the kitchen could barely hold two people at once. But it was mine. Every square foot. After months of being treated like a burden, this humble little space whispered something I hadn't heard in a long time. "You belong here." Judith helped me unpack what little I had rescued: my photo albums, Harold's medals, the heirloom brooches, a single skillet, and the donated couch from her church group. We laughed as we rearranged the furniture for the third time, arguing over where the good light came in. But behind our smiles, we both knew this was more than just decorating. It was rebuilding. I couldn't replace everything. The china set, the antique mirror, Harold's old record player, they were still missing. But I had my name on a lease, a mailbox of my own, and in the evenings, when the light hit the tiny balcony just right, I would sit with a cup of coffee and feel something close to peace. Still, the silence from Brent gnawed at me. Not a call, not a message. I told myself it was better this way: clean break, clean start. But sometimes I wondered what he was telling my grandkids. Did they ask about me? Did they miss my Sunday pancakes or the stories I used to read? Or was I now just grandma who went away? 3 weeks after moving in, my phone rang. Brent's name flashed across the screen. My stomach twisted. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, and maybe a sliver of hope, got the better of me. "Mom," he said, tone clipped businesslike. "We need to talk about your credit cards."
Not "how are you?"
Not "I'm sorry." Just straight to money. "They're still frozen," I replied evenly. "Lucy needs them. For the kids." "No," I said, surprising even myself with how steady I sounded. "They stay frozen."
"Be reasonable," he snapped.
I said calmly. "When I gave you everything." He hung up, and as I stared at the blank screen, one truth settled over me with perfect clarity. He didn't call because he missed me. He called because the money stopped. I set the phone down slowly, letting the silence wash over me like a wave. For the first time in months, it wasn't painful. It was clarifying. Brent hadn't reached out because he regretted what he'd done. He called because Lucy's access to my wallet had been cut off. That was it.
No guilt. No remorse.
Just inconvenience. I stood by the window, watching the late autumn leaves swirl in the breeze outside my new apartment, and realized something with startling clarity. I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. Not my money. Not my time. Not even an explanation. That weekend, I noticed a flyer pinned to the bulletin board in the community lounge, support group for seniors, life transitions and new beginnings. It felt like a whisper from the universe. I'd been living in quiet isolation, tiptoeing around my own grief. Maybe it was time to speak, to be heard. So the following Tuesday, I tucked one of Harold's old handkerchiefs into my purse for courage and walked into a sunlit room filled with soft chairs, warm coffee, and strangers who somehow already felt familiar. A kind woman named Nancy ran the group. She welcomed me with a gentle smile and asked if I'd like to share. I hesitated. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I told the truth. Not just the facts, but the feelings. I told them about the house, the surgery, the suitcase on the porch, about the post-it note, the credit card theft, the betrayal that took my breath more than the gallbladder ever could. And when I finished, the room was quiet, not with judgment, but with understanding. A woman named Eleanor reached across and squeezed my hand. My daughter did something similar, she said softly. It took years, but I built my life back. You will too. And for the first time, I believed it. By the time we broke for coffee and cookies, I had 3 phone numbers in my pocket and an invitation to dinner the following Friday. I walked home slower than usual. Not because of the surgery, but because I was finally starting to feel the ground beneath my feet again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning to live on my own terms. And I was no longer alone. 6 months after being left on a porch with stitches still fresh and a suitcase full of nothing that mattered, I stood behind the counter of Sweet Haven Bakery. Hands dusted with flour and the scent of cinnamon and vanilla thick in the air. The windows gleamed from the morning sun, catching just right on the handwritten chalkboard sign that read "Fresh Baked Piece, served daily." Beside me, Judith was fussing over a tray of blueberry scones like they were delicate artifacts. I still can't believe we actually did this, she said, half laughing, half crying. I smiled as I arranged a platter of apple turnovers, the very recipe Lucy once called too old-fashioned. Funny how something too old could make a line form out the door on Saturdays. When I'd received the settlement from Brent and Lucy, $165,000 plus interest, quietly signed and sealed to avoid court, I never imagined I'd use it to open a bakery. But Judith did. She had always joked that my pies could fix a broken heart, and one night, over a bottle of cheap wine and a better idea, we put pen to paper and drafted a dream. What started as therapy became a plan, then a lease, and finally, this little shop on the corner of Main and Willow, where healing rose like bread dough every morning. On our grand opening, Eleanor and a few others from the support group brought flowers and hugs, and a tiny dwarf apple tree in a terracotta pot. For new beginnings, she said. I placed it by the front window, where it catches light all day and reminds me that growth doesn't always start in spring. Business wasn't booming, but it was steady, honest. And each compliment from a customer felt like a brick laid in the foundation of a life I'd built with my own 2 hands, not for someone else's comfort, not in someone else's home, but mine. Then one quiet Tuesday, just after lunchtime, the bell above the door jingled. I looked up, expecting a regular. Instead, it was Brent. Thinner, paler, standing awkwardly by the entrance, like a boy sent to the principal's office. I froze, icing spatula still in hand. "Mom," he said, his voice barely carrying. I didn't speak, just stared. Because in that moment I knew he wasn't here to apologize. He was here because his world had fallen apart without me.